Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're located, and welcome everyone. And thank you for taking the time today to join us on this webinar organized by DALIM Software in partnership with our North American distributor, Blanchard Systems. My name is Graham Blanks, and I am the Director of Business Operations for DALIM Software here in North America. I'm located in Orlando, Florida, which is actually very sunny and warm today. I'm joined today by Mike Moscato. He's located in Los Angeles, California, 3 hours behind myself. He is the Senior Technical Specialist at Blanchard Systems. And as a lot of us know, he's a seasoned veteran on the DALIM software solution. Today's webinar is titled, How to Collaborate More Closely with Your Remote Customers' Employees in This New Normal. And it is the third episode in season 3 of the DALIM Software on Air series of webinars. As we all know, COVID-19 has changed our lives dramatically, with many of us now working and collaborating remotely, digital meetings replacing the traditional in-person meeting. This has created obviously some challenges as well as some opportunities for those of us working in the creative operations and printing industry. Today's webinar is going to be a little different. We've dispensed with the usual keynote and PowerPoint presentations and have instead decided to focus more time on demonstrating our solution. In this particular case, it's a pre-release of DALIM's ES6 and how it can be leveraged in these times of almost zero travel. So just some housekeeping. You'll see in the GoToMeeting control panel a questions panel. Please feel free to submit questions. We're going to hold off questions until Mike Moscato has finished his demonstration. Today, along with myself and Mike, we are joined by Fred Padilla, who's the CTO at Blanchard Systems, based in New Orleans, Louisiana. He's going to be assisting and Mike with his demonstration. And we're also joined by DALIM Software's Rafael Orandes, who is based in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So a few people from a lot of different time zones and different areas of the world. So now I'm going to hand it over to Mike Moscato. And over to you, Mike.
Okay, I hope you see my screen. Just let me know if the screen shows, Graham, and then I'll...
Yep, I see the screen.
Okay, good morning or good afternoon or maybe good evening, depending on where you are. As Graham mentioned, this is a PowerPoint and Keynote free demonstration. My understanding is that, we have attendees who are familiar with ES and maybe others who are not. So I'm basically going to gear the demo over showing some basics. If you are familiar with ES, you're also going to see some new ES6 features. I think some of them I'll remember to mention, others you will see them and you'll know, well, this is something that's different. The way I'm going to structure this is I'm going to log into ES and I'm going to come in as a user who is starting his day of work. So I guess I'm the user. And we're going to see, again, for those of you who aren't familiar with ES, you're going to see a couple different views. I'm starting with what we call a smart view. A smart view is a way to create a customized view for a specific user. So I'm basically presented now with the files and jobs for which I am currently responsible. And I'm going to basically work through a couple scenarios. I have some packaging files I'm going to have to work on. I have some images that have come in that I'm going to have to do some rating on. And I have a book that I'm going to have to review and either edit or approve and move out. So we're going to start with looking at the packaging files that I have presented. So I see immediately that I've got 5 different files I need to work on. Now, if I had my druthers, I would just work on the ones I want to and just slough off the things that I'm not interested in. But we want to find out, well, which of these have a deadline that's the closest. You know, if there's any that aren't due for another couple of weeks, obviously I should work on the ones that are more current. So I'm going to switch to, this is a newer view in ES6. This is what we call the Gantt chart. And what this does is this is going to present me with a list of my current jobs. And if we just look at the little graphic on the right, this basically shows the timeline on these. So I can immediately ignore these bottom two because they aren't due till, I think it's the 29th. And we'll look at these three because all three of these are due pretty much the same time. Now, the job, the AAA job, frankly, doesn't seem familiar to me. And I'm wondering, because I haven't got any notifications on it, do I even have to work on that job? If you look at the bottom, we have a little workload option. And I'm going to just check this myself. And I see, you know, I don't have to do anything with that job. So I'm going to ignore the AAA job, and I'm going to concentrate on these top two. So I'm going to do two scenarios for you here. First of all, especially for those of you who aren't familiar with ES, I'm going to step through the first job just so you get a very basic notion of how in ES we view, approve, and interact with files. Now, as you probably already know, everything I'm doing is through a browser. So anybody who needs to interact with the system obviously doesn't have to be in the office. You can be anywhere. And this is the file for that one job. When I click on it, notice the panel on the right-hand side. The right-hand side is basically reflecting the workflow process or the business process that's defined for this particular job. It has different milestones. We can see that it was previously approved. Looks like Biff Berfley approved it at the first two approval steps. Now, you know, obviously I could just look at it like this, and if I was exceedingly lazy, I could just determine that the file is good at this point. But you know, we don't want to presume too much, so we're going to go into the viewer. Now, the high-res viewer is in certain respects kind of one of the central features of ES, again, because we're doing soft proofing at this point. Now, I'm not going to show you too many of the features at this point because we'll get into some of those later on. But anyone who's interacted with our software in the past knows that we use what's referred to as a pixel-on-demand technology, meaning when I first view the file, I'm really just looking at a preview. But as we zoom and pan and scroll, we are actually looking at the high-res data that is streamed to the browser. So we're always looking at not a representation of the high-res data, but that is the high-res data pushed down to us. And, you know, when you get into notions of color fidelity, we have ICC settings that will work with your calibrated monitor and use the ICC profiles that either are embedded, or you can set up your own rules for how you want to represent the colors on the screen. So, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, I had spent a fair amount of time scrolling and looking at the file, and maybe I went in and did a quick annotation that, you know, I think it's good. Now, since I'm the final arbiter on this file, I'm really just putting a note to myself. So if everything seems good to me, if I approve the file, you'll notice it's popping up this little job ticket for me. So we always have options when we move through a file to determine how it's going to be processed further down the line. Since I think this file is good, I don't think it needs any channel mapping. Since I'm working remote right now, I don't think there's a proofer I want to send to it. But since I'm working for a very large organization, we have several different plants. So let's say we need to send it to the Los Angeles plant and the Seattle plant. And we're going to say OK to that. So what does that do? Well, notice in my panel, the file disappeared. Say, well, did it get deleted? Where did it go? Well, the reason it disappeared is, again, this is basically my plate. This is my plate of files that I need to work on. So since it's gone, it means I no longer am involved in that job. I no longer need to approve it. But for the sake of the demo, we should go and take a look in that project and see what actually happened to it. And if we look, we see that the file has proceeded all the way to the end. It's been delivered. And if we look on my desktop, now obviously I didn't send it to Los Angeles or Seattle, but the logic that's built into this is to send it out. I have it sending out via SFTP. You can use standard protocols, FTP. So it sent it out to these. It creates a folder based on the customer name, the project name, and there's my files. Now, another thing that I have set up per default in here, though, is I also sent it to, and if you look at the panel on the right, this little file system column. So let's assume that we were still working in the office. And so you'll see that that file was also sent into this folder. Now you'd say, well, that's kind of stupid because the file already exists in ES inside the customer. So why would you want to send it to another area? Well, the reason we might want to do that is that what we're seeing in ES here is we're actually mirroring a true file system. In fact, I think I have this mounted. Yeah, if you look here, this is, I've actually shared out, it's essentially my file server here. And so if you have users who just like to work directly off the file server to grab their files and maybe they don't really need to interact with ES, we can still present the files to them directly through this file server. So you can see the folder structure here exactly mirrors what ES is showing. So we can just point the ES server to a file server. You can see here, we can point it to an S3 volume. We could point it to Dropbox. So one of the important things to remember in working in remote environment like we are now is that with ES, you have access to files that are sitting in multiple different locations. So if you're disorganized like I am, and you have files kind of scattered around, or if you just need to, or if you use S3 as a basic storage bucket, ES can still be that central hub to access those files and those assets. Very important point to remember. So let's now look at a job that's a little more problematic. And this was the other job that was on my timeline that we need to work with. So I'm going to open this up in the viewer. And we're going to, first of all, I should have pointed this out on the other file, that when especially if we're going to look at, like I say, a packaging file like this, we want to be able to check all the channels, check our spot colors. And anytime you can look at a combination of your spots. If you need to make note of certain issues that you might see in the file, get here and draw on it. Now I'm looking at this file and I see, I'm not sure if this Pantone color is right, because in terms of what we see in the swatches here, this is supposed to be a PMS 8642. If we look at the channels, it's 8620. So I've just alerted, one of my big men to come in and take a look at the file and see if he can confirm for me that there's a problem with it. Now, if I zoom up here, we also see that this text is chopped off. And you see someone else just came in and actually did put a comment in here, so we can have a couple people coming in. In fact, we have Fred has come in. I didn't really notice this problem here. What's the problem there? It looks like the text is chopped off in this file. And what is the issue over here? We can see Marcellus Wallace is pointing out that this Pantone, yeah, it should be 8642, not 8620. Okay. So I'll tell him that I'll fix that. And I'm not sure what, Fred is telling us that this text is truncated. I thought it looked a bit odd, but I wasn't really sure. Okay, so I think we can see that this is not the best prep file in the world. So I suspect mushroomy teriyaki chicken. Yeah, that's a problem. So what I'm going to do is, now obviously in the real world, it might take a while for somebody to fix this file. So I'm going to reject it. And what we would typically see is, it's going to go out somewhere and someone's going to edit it and fix it for us. But I suspect that Fred is a really fast worker and is going to get me an updated file here. You'll notice the status has changed to rejected. Click on the file. And the other thing I'll point out is this was sitting at a milestone called design review. It had already gone through an initial check-in process. And if you reject a file, you can just delete it if you choose to. It should send out a notification. I'm waiting for Fred to upload the file. If he doesn't, I'll just have to upload it myself.
It's on its way.
Okay. Fred is working from New Orleans. My ES server is a VM sitting on my laptop in Southern California. So you can see the status on the file just changed. You can see that little 2-2 there. It means it's the second version of 2. So we basically have two items that need to be fixed. First, we need to confirm that that text has been fixed. And this is a pretty core feature within ES, is the ability to compare two different versions. So first of all, I'm just going to zoom up on it and see if the text looks good to me. It looks pretty good, but let's do a compare. If we go to the little compare button, we're asking it to show us version 1 and version 2. Now, one thing you see is sometimes the notes can get in the way, right? They kind of take up a lot of real estate, so we can just hide them. If you want to get a little more real estate on the screen, you can put away the tools. We'll pan up and zoom. And I would say that Fred did a bang-up job fixing our text on there. So I believe that I'm going to just go ahead and approve this file. And I want Fred to hold off for a second here, because I want you to note that, and I should have mentioned this earlier, whenever we build the logic for processing files, we determine who needs to approve at different milestones and how many people. So at this design review thing, it wasn't enough that I just approved it. We have it set up that 2 people need to approve so it can continue forward. I suspect Fred is going to agree with me that this file looks good. and he'll probably approve it as well, so we can continue through the process. There we go. Now, there still is an outstanding issue on this file, and that's the fact that the spot color is wrong. So we need to remap that spot color to the appropriate color. If I go to the properties here, this colors tab, that's our problematic spot color. And this is the spot color we've been told to map it to. So we're going to say OK to that. And now when I approve the file, you saw this job ticket earlier when we did that first job. And this time I'm going to tell it, yes, we do need to do some channel mapping. Notice in terms of how we can configure our job tickets in here, and I should have mentioned earlier that everything we're doing here today is basically set up and customized based on how I wanted this to work. So those of you who are not familiar with ES, you need to be aware that typically the out-of-the-box solution is pretty basic. And what we do with ES is we then build it around how you work and what your workflow needs are. So it's pretty rare that you're going to see somebody just load ES and go to work and never change anything after that. Now, it would be nice if simply clicking that little button there automatically edited the file and updated it. But what's actually happening now is the file has been passed off to our workflow engine that sits underneath. Those of you who know DALIM products know that it's basically the twist product that's taking care of the remapping, because this is a fairly complex file. It has to be able to resolve any overprints or transparencies that exist in it. And I know from running it takes about maybe 40, 45 seconds on my fairly slow laptop VM. But one thing I'll point out, and this is typically something that users don't see, and you probably don't want them to see because you want to hide the complexity from your users. So all they're doing is viewing, approving, tagging files with metadata and so forth. But this is the actual process that this file is running in. These are the areas where it stopped to be approved. This is actually the workflow that did the color remapping, and it's actually done. And it's generating a preview for us. And this whole process is basically built and put together by an admin, and through consulting with your different departments on how they want to work, who needs to be involved, and so forth. You'll notice the status has changed in the right-hand column. It's asking me to confirm that the channel mapping is correct. Well, about the only way I can do that is go into the viewer. And first of all, if we just check the channels now, it is 8642. It's no longer whatever that other one was. And we can actually zoom up on this thing. And again, we look at the compare mode. We should actually see. I would have to conclude that that is definitely, well, it's definitely different. And since the channels confirms it's 8642, I would say that this file is ready to go. So we'll get out of the compare. We're going to approve it. And again, it's asking me this question. You'll notice the job ticket is different now. It no longer has the option for remapping because as we proceed through the workflow, we can change how the different panels and job tickets display for us. I'm going to send it to Las Vegas and Dallas, I guess. And let's say I did say I needed to actually make a proof on it. Maybe we're back in the office now. Someone's got a proof they want to make. Or you know, it could be a remote proof at a different site. This guy's approved. He's done. And Vegas got a file. Dallas got a file. And again, this is my virtual proofer. You can see it sent it out to the proofer that I requested. So I've got my packaging jobs done. I'm not working on those because they aren't due for a few weeks. So what I have to do now is I have a bunch of images that are going to be used for a particular project. And I think I'm going a little long here, Graham, so I might have to speed it up. I don't know how much time I have. But what I,
Yeah, you're fine, Mike. Fine, Mike,
okay,
keep going.
okay. So what I want to do is I want to go through and rate these files. Now you can see I've already got plenty of these with like 4, 3 stars and so forth. But I want to start filtering them because basically the ones that have 0 stars are the ones I probably still need to rate. And I need to point out that again, an element you always need to keep in mind in terms of how we present information to a user in ES is we commonly work with metadata for these files. So the reason those packaging files showed up when I said packaging is because we tag them with specific metadata when the files are ingested. So based on the workflow this came into, they were identified as packaging files, and that's why they show in this view. By the same token, my images come in through a completely separate process and get tagged as images, but not only that in terms of whether they need to be rated, I identified certain characteristics of the file to know whether they did indeed still need to be rated. So let's go through and see how I'm going to deal with these guys. So again, I'm just going to deal with all the ones that are currently 0s. So the first thing I want you to notice is if I tag this as a 4, notice that disappears because it's no longer a 0, right? And if you have a bunch of files, you really don't want to go through them one at a time, although you could. I mean, there's a slideshow mode here. We give ourselves a little more real estate by putting the panels away, right? So you could step through them like this. He's a 4-star, and maybe he's a 4-star. And sometimes it can get a little disconcerting if they disappear off the screen. So you could still keep the all option on, right? And just scroll through and find the 0s and tag them. But you know, since time is limited, let's just go to the 0s. And you can just grab a whole bunch of them at once. And I mean, these are fabulous photos, so I'm going to 5-star all of them. These, I don't really know what those are supposed to be. I don't think they fit in. Those are 1s. And oh, there's a couple more 1s. Out. Duck, how can you go wrong with a duck? And with flowers, you can't go wrong with that either. 4-star. So I've basically cleared my plate here, right? Now, in terms of rating, tagging images, that sort of thing, there's really a couple ways people go about it. You can do the ratings, the star ratings, but some people just like to do selects. And in terms of, you know, making customized views for how you prefer to work, you know, I've got another smart view here that's almost identical to the other one, but if you prefer to do selects, you can do selects or rejects. Another thing you'll notice is when I came to this smart view, I'm seeing all sorts of extra stuff that we didn't see in the other one. That's because, again, I've got it filtered differently. Notice this little button up here. This is showing me pretty much every file, whether it's a file I need to approve or not. If I want to see just the files, again, that are on my plate, I can click the button, and now I see only files that I'm supposed to be approving. The reason you didn't see it in the other screen is I just set this one up by default. So you don't give the user the option to go and see stuff he's not supposed to be working on. So again, you can control what your users see and what they don't see. So what I need to do with these guys is I need to push them forward because I need them to populate the project that they're associated with. So I'm just going to grab a bunch of them, kick them ahead. And there is some logic in here that's going to treat these files a little differently because all of my files that are 3 stars or less are going to go in a different direction than the other guys. And let's check our status here. I think, if I remember right, I think I might have overthought this workflow because I think I had too many different approval steps in it. Let's see. Because I'm pretty sure this moved ahead to a different user who needs to approve those. Let's see if it's this guy here. No, maybe I just let them go through. Let's take a look. Frankly, I don't recall how I set that up. This is the project they should be going to. Yeah, so basically what happened is as soon as I approved those, it hit a rule that evaluated the way the files are named and sent them to the appropriate customer, the appropriate project. Now, anyone who's familiar with DALIM software and DALIM products probably knows that we really love naming conventions. So in this case, we parsed the name and it went to an input rule that knew where to associate the files. But I need to go back and finish my thought on these other files because, yeah, see, because what I did was the low-rated images obviously did not go to the project because, you know, we determined we don't really like those files. However, you can still keep them hanging around if someone wants to go back and revisit them. And what I've done with these is I sent them to a milestone that will sit for 3 days. Basically, I give it a 3-day grace period. After 3 days, if nobody decides they want them, it'll delete them off of the system. And again, this is just done through the way you manage your different milestones and give them deadlines, or in the terminology they use, there's a duration on it. And when the time limit expires, we can tell it to continue through the workflow or just to delete them off. And that's what we're going to do with these guys. So we've rated our files. We've moved them to the project that they need to go to. And now, in terms of the things that I saw on my little panel here, the last thing I needed to do was some page checks, okay? Now, the fact is, for the purposes of this demo, you know, I've already got these pages ready, but in terms of the normal logic, obviously, once those images are presented in the project, that's when someone would utilize them to build these pages. So let's see what's going on in terms of managing a project, which in this case it's like an 8-page brochure, right? And the files have already been sent to me. And actually, I was playing with this yesterday. I need to revert. This is a good thing to know. If you're familiar with ES, you know that dealing with revisions was sometimes a little problematic because you couldn't go through and get rid of old versions. Now I need to make revision 1 my current version. This is what you get for practicing on your demo and then forgetting to go back and set things back. But this is easy enough to deal with. So what we're looking at these are all the files in the project, so you can open them all up at once, right? And you can go through and review the pages, do everything that you saw us do before. In fact, you can see I already had some comments in here. So, and we'll just assume that someone's already marked this up because they did, I did. For instance, someone came in here and said, why is there a black and white image in this page? They're all color. So why don't we get an image that goes with the rest of the theme in here? And let's say they go through and they look at all the others, and the same with right here. I mean, we got lampposts everywhere. Couldn't we get something else in there? So let's see how we fix these files now. We're going to go to the search screen. We're going to figure out how do we find some files that we could use. Now, I happen to have tagged some files earlier. Lamppost. How many files can be lamppost files? So I can look and say, well, these are 4 different versions of that image. They're obviously not black and white. So maybe I want to consider these. But I know for a fact that there were some other lamppost files, but I guess they weren't tagged. So how could I find these other files? Obviously lamppost isn't in the name and it's not in the metadata. So how could I find other files with lamppost? Because I gotta have more lamppost, right? So there's a search feature in here called similarity. I'm going to drag one of these guys in there and I'm going to tell it to ignore that lamppost tag. So notice all of a sudden, you see this little slider here. This is basically a threshold. It's bringing up other files that have lampposts in them. And they definitely are not the same lamppost in that file. And if I widen my threshold, it's going to pick up more. So there's one with a lamppost sitting in the distance. I suspect it picked up these because of these little objects. So when we ingest files, we can basically builds a map of the geometry of them. Here's the lamppost with the bird on top. Now, the fact is, I don't necessarily want to use any of these other files, but I just wanted to make the point that there are multiple ways to search and find files. And I'll also point out, I think this is the file. Let's see. Oh yeah. This is the point I wanted to make. If you look at this file, we basically tell it to present for us the path for where the file exists. So when we did a search, this found a file that's on my S3 volume in Amazon. There was, gee, I just had it up here. Because there's another one it found that's on Dropbox. And it found a file. See, the FS1, that means it's on my local file system. And I know there's a Dropbox file in here. I won't spend all day looking for it, but yeah, right here. So this guy's on Dropbox. So our search found assets that are scattered across 3 different volumes that we monitor. So that's a pretty powerful feature, which again, if you have people who prefer to upload to one area and you have assets stored somewhere else, we can still grab all of those through a basic search like this. But let's get back to finding a good replacement for that black and white image. So these are the 4 we're interested in. So let's bring them into the viewer so we can take a look-see at them. Again, what you're about to see is a newer ES6 feature. So I could go in here kind of one at a time, right, and go into the compare mode like this, view them side by side and go back and forth and compare them all. But that's kind of a losing situation. It'll take forever. But what we can do is we can come in here and I'm going to tell it, I want to view all of them at once. And if I'm in this synchronized view, I can start panning and scrolling all 4 images at once. And I'll point out these files are on a S3 volume. So these are working across from Amazon. So I'm going to very quickly say, well, yeah, that one, the sky doesn't look right to me. So let's get rid of him. This guy, I don't know. I think it's a little too warm for my taste. And lastly, I don't know, I kind of like the brighter blue, so I'm going to tell it to close the other guy. And this is what we're going to settle on. So for the purposes of easily identifying him now from his associates, going to approve him. And since I approved him, let's go back to the lamppost view. He's the green guy. So I need to park him somewhere where I can easily access him because I'm about to go into InDesign. And I need to be able to quickly find that file. So what I have here is what's called a collection. I have my own private collection. I'm going to throw that guy in there. Why did I do that? Here's why. Here's our original InDesign document. And what we have over here is a plugin, our InDesign plugin. And notice that the plugin from InDesign is looking at ES. There's all my file system volumes. There's my S3 volume. In fact, this is the project we're working on, right? Webinar, Parks and Trails. There's all the images that have been used in this page. But what I need is that file that I threw in my private collection. I have my selected collection. There it is. There's my file. Let's get them in here. Select that box, drag them in. Takes a second because it's, again, pulling it down. So we also had noted that, you know, we got lampposts just popping up everywhere. So let's put something else in there. And I had parked this on my S3 volume. I got a file in the extras folder. So again, let's use him instead. Drag him in. And let's fit him into that box. Okay, so now we need to update our project in ES, right? We need to get the new pages slotted in and updated. So we're going to export just those 2 pages. Name is fine. We'll just keep the same name. And you'll notice where I'm putting it. Now, there is the ability within the plugin to upload it directly, but I want to show you another feature that, again, if you're not familiar with ES, it's an important one to know in terms of how files are ingested and how they get into the system. Because we constantly have what we refer to as input channels who are polling and watching. You can be watching hot folders, you can be watching FTP servers. In this case, I'm watching an SFTP server. And as files arrive, we grab them, we apply a rule to them, and we assign them to the appropriate area within ES. So I think this one is set up. Yep, it's gonna convert it to swap. Pages 4 and 5, go. So if we watch that folder that I told it to dump it in, this guy. There's our PDF. So what should happen is in about, I don't know, 5 or 6 seconds, that guy's going to disappear. And again, this is local to my Mac, and there he goes. So what happened to him? Notice how the display just changed on these. Notice it says 3 of 3. So I can now go in Did I actually fix them? Got a bird and I got a lamppost that's not black and white. I think that's good, right? And this is an option that's new in ES6 as well. If I just have 2 pages here that I want to view as a spread, there we go. And I want to get the cropped view. Oh, that is the cropped view. Yeah, I just had the bleed lines on. So there we have our final file. So to wrap this up, I'm going to approve those 2 pages. And so these are now sitting at the last step in here where it's waiting for a final approval. Let's say you want somebody who wants to come in and view this as a book. This is a really great feature in ES if you're working with publications or books. This is what we call the virtual book, or some people like to call it the flippy book. I like the flippy book. And what you can do is now just scroll through this as if it is an actual book. And you can see that even from this view, a user can approve or reject the pages. They could still, if they chose to, put notes or annotations on the thing. There it is. In fact, those notes you saw earlier that I forgot to get rid of were entered in this way. If you needed to do a final check and you needed to search for some text that's in here, all the text is searchable. So this appears, if you look at the lower left, 5 times. Here's the table of contents. Every time the word Irvine is used. And we can step ahead, step back. And the reason we're able to do this is when we ingest files, we extract, or we don't have to, we extract all the text, again, as metadata. So that's why all this stuff is searchable. And another thing I'll point out is, let's say you have users who are, or clients who aren't necessarily users within ES. And maybe you want them, or they have a need to view this thing without actually logging into the system. What you can do is go out and share a link to them. So I'm going to share the view of this job, the virtual book. And what you do is you're going to email them a link. Now, I'm not going to email that to anybody, but if I do, well, let's just go ahead and open Safari. Let's just paste this in here. That link will just automatically bring up the virtual book for them. So they don't have to log into ES. And you can see if they wanted to, they could still go ahead and approve it. And this is a view some people like to do. You know, it's like they're working in a real book. You turn the pages. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. I just love turning the pages. So, last point, and I'll turn it back over to Graham. And this is an important concept. We want to get into Chrome, not Firefox. You've seen me work these files individually, but they are inside of a project. With the ES, we track per document, but we also manage and track projects. That's why I was able to bring up that view earlier that showed me which ones are due now and which ones are due later. And there is I hate to use this word, but there is a certain synergy between the documents or document workflows in the project. So if you look at my project here, when all is said and done, I want to push out all of the pages in the flat plan and generate a new single PDF. Because typically when we run files through something like this, we pre-flight them, we normalize them, we do all that stuff. But you'll notice I can't do that. I'm not at that point. And the reason I can't do it is the project as a whole is waiting to be notified that all of the individual documents are approved and ready to go. So watch what's going to happen here. When I approve all those pages, you're going to see a status change in the document workflow. Notice how it now jumped. So now this is available because we've basically confirmed that all our pages are good. Therefore, the project as a whole is allowed to move forward. So if I click this guy, what's going to happen, and again, this happened in the background. I'm going to have some pages show up. I'm not sure where, yeah, here we go. You
Well,
see
Mike,
the time?
sorry
Time.
to cut you off, but can you?
That's the last thing I was going to
That's the
show.
last
Look at
thing. Fantastic. Perfect timing.
that's it. I made a whole bunch of stuff.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mike. That was a very good demonstration, as always. But we have a couple of questions, so we'll open it up to the other people that have joined, Fred and Raphael, if you or I are not able to answer those questions. So obviously, you spoke about the fact that we heavily rely on naming convention. A lot of people do for production, but a lot of people have to deal with the issue that their clients may not have a naming convention or may have a different naming convention for their files. In those sorts of situations, how would you normally handle that?
Well, if the clients have a different naming convention, as long as their different naming convention is consistent, we can build around their naming convention. Because I'll just show you real quick. I've basically avoided showing you all the admin stuff in here during this demo, but these are what we call rule sets. And we work with regular expressions to parse file names. We can also, once files are ingested, parse metadata. So we can have multiple rules, and they can be associated with specific customers, projects, so forth. So we're not restricted to what we consider to be an appropriate naming convention. Basically, you work with your clients, and if they insist, we got to name them this way, we build around what their naming convention is.
Okay. So here's another question. In the viewer, is there a possibility to have an outline view? Like you have in Illustrator. I believe we have that in Litho.
Yeah, it doesn't exist in the ES viewer. That's a good request, though. I would like that.
Yeah. Here's another question related to the flat plan. Can the flat plan be used to display page-specific metadata, i.e. page 1 has some metadata, page 2 has different metadata?
Well, in terms of how I would look at the metadata, if I select page 1, this is, oops, not there. This is the metadata associated with it. You can also view metadata by just going to the properties for a file. And this is all the metadata associated with it. So really, the way you would do it is select it and open up the job ticket to see the metadata associated with it. You can also, if it's specific metadata values that you always want to be able to view, you can create a smart view that will actually slap the metadata right on top of the preview. Because
I think the question here is, can you have a similar display in the flat plan that you have for thumbnails in the gallery view, I guess?
Well, yes, you can, because the way you do it is within a project, you can have the same kind of view. Because you'll notice right here, there's the flat plan, and here is basically a smart view within the same project. And if, again, the metadata that is of interest can be set up in the smart view so it all displays right down at the bottom. Because what I'm displaying here is project, customer, name of file, but any piece of metadata that you're interested in can be configured to show up in that view.
All right. So you've been predominantly working in the regular ES interface, and you've shown the Flippy book. Are there any other interfaces available?
Do you mean like a desktop view?
I do.
Well, sure there is. This is an important concept in ES, is what we call user profiles. So based on the profile that you're assigned to, Now, again, I'm logging in as the same user I've been working at the whole time, but we're going to see a completely different view. So you can tailor your views based on preference for a user. So you can see here, let's go to webinar. It's the job we were working on. The desktops are basically built around smart views, but you can see that, let's see, oh, there's my lamppost view for my search. Go back from search, and you can jump to different types of views. So basically, I just went to that view that we were in earlier, where I just view the files that I need to work on, right? I can go to the Gantt chart if I need to. There he is.
All right.
So you
Another question for you. Another question for you, Mike. Milestone approval, is that only one person, or can a milestone be used for multiple approvers? I'm not sure if that's a project or a document milestone, but I assume the answer is the same for both.
What do you mean by multiple approvals? I'm not sure what that question is.
Well, I guess it's more about, you know, do you set the approver to approve on one person, or one of three, or all three?
Oh, all right. Well, now you're going to force me to get back out of this. Let's go to one of these projects we're goofing with. So you can see the way this one was originally set up. At that first milestone, I said any user assigned this role can approve it, and there's only one of them. The next one, this is actually a group, but 2 members of the group needed to approve it to go forward. But, excuse me, if you're working with a milestone to approve, see if I can get there. You can see they have this approver summary. So you can assign multiple roles. So in this instance, it would take one person, somebody who was assigned that role, or someone who was assigned that one. Or you can do all. So you would have to have 2 approvers now at this milestone. Okay. Somebody who is from that role and someone who plays that role.
All right. Well, we're running out of time here, so we've got to maybe grab last 1 or 2 questions. The next question is related to, I think this is a new feature in ES6 where you can limit the number of concurrent users to a specific customer or org unit. Is that possible? And this may not be a question for you, Mike. This might be a question for Raphael.
Well, I've heard of that before, but
yeah,
if it could be done, I'm not sure how it's done.
So just go to the user profiles. If you click on the user organizations, and go to the main organization.
Is that per
security
org unit, or
number of license? You have that under customers too.
Oh, you have that under customers as well as org units?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And one last question before we wrap up, since we're heading up on the hour. When you share the virtual book link, can someone approve or reject the page, and which user is registered to do it?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
You can view and approve.
You saw when I went in there that it presented the approve and reject to me. As soon as I saw that, that same question occurred to me, because frankly, I'm not sure why that user should have been allowed to reject it, unless when I shared it, it gave them specific rights to do that. But I'm not sure if that's true.
That's exactly right. If you share a virtual book, you can share as a specific user, and if that specific user have rights to approve, then you use the same user profile. and you'll be able to approve that. View as, you see the third option?
Yeah, but when you share a virtual book, it doesn't present the view as.
Yeah, but you have to choose the view as first, and then you share it.
Yeah.
It's a good, actually, it's a good point that you highlight. We should keep the view as option as for the flipbook too.
Okay.
So basically what it did is it defaulted to me, and that's why that user had the rights to approve it.
Exactly.
All right, so there's obviously the burning question, since we're showing a pre-release of DALIM ES6, when will ES6 be officially released? The current plan is to officially release ES6 around the Worldwide Technical Meeting, which is scheduled for December 1st to December 4th. So if you're not aware of the Worldwide Technical Meeting and the post-training, go ahead and take a look at our website, and there's some information there if you'd like to register for the event. I just want to wrap up. Thank everybody for attending. Look forward to seeing you guys at another digital event, and hopefully maybe in 2021 we can get back together at an in-person event. I want to thank Mike Moscato and Fred Padilla from Blanchard Systems and Raphael from DALIM Software. Apologies if we didn't get to everybody's questions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much, and that concludes the webinar today.